Welcome back to the First Cut Podcast live on CBS Sports Network. Rick Gehman, Kyle Porter, and of course, Patrick McDonald here for all your Wyndham Championship needs. And gentlemen, the storyline so far this week is not named Jordan. It's not named Sungjae. It's not even named Siwoo. It is the Debby show around these parts because the weather is going to play a massive role this week. Patrick, I'm going to throw it to you first because you are already experiencing, you're in Charleston, what is going on with this tropical storm as it comes in and off the coast. And you're seeing it early. I'm just north of you. I'm in Greensboro. We're starting to get it right now, but this is going to be a big story for the next couple of days.
It is. I had to get some information from a subject matter expert. Shout out to Jim Crooked Cantor from the Weather Channel, who I met on my morning run this morning. We were talking about the path of Debby, and it kind of shot out there to the right into the Atlantic Ocean, got a quick little water break, and then it's coming back allegedly, per Jim, towards Charleston this afternoon, and then it's going towards you, Rick, there in Greensboro, North Carolina. I think that's going to be around Friday morning. Yeah, like you mentioned there in your tweet. And so that's obviously the storyline this week. How much golf are they going to be able to play? Seems like they might be able to play a little Thursday morning, but that could be kind of unfair to some players. It's going to be a lot of stop and go, maybe no golf Friday. How much golf over the weekend? You got to play a lot of holes because look, it's the last regular season event of the season. Only the top 70 move on from here. So there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of variables that honestly I don't have the answers to.
Does
Yeah, we
Jim
don't have the
Cantor have
answers.
any? Does Jim Cantor have any FedEx Cup takes?
He does not know. We were talking about the flooding in the market there in Charleston. He was like, it flooded here last night, Patrick. And I was like, well, Jim, it floods here every night. So not much of a revelation there, but good for you.
Those are a couple of big brains battling it out this morning. Glad to see you guys were able
Sure.
we're able to connect. KP, so we're obviously not experts here, but I'm taking pieces of obviously what we're seeing on the radar, what we're seeing from various forecasts, and also a lot of what the tour has put out themselves. So the expectation is that there will be anywhere from 4 to 5 inches of rain on Thursday alone, and then probably another 1 to 1.5 on Friday. That much rain in that short period of time does not lend itself to playing professional golf in a fair and safe manner. So I'm thinking that Thursday could essentially be completely washed out. What do we do here? This is our regular season finale. We've got 4 rounds we need to get in, and we've got trouble lurking from Mother Nature.
Do you think they'll play ball in hand, or do you think they'll play it down?
Definitely
Down.
play ball in hand.
Yeah, it's not great. What would you do, Rick? What if they just said, "Hey, let's take it to the track, man. Let's play it all indoors and see what happens." Would you be like what would your reaction to that be?
I'd be in. Yeah, I mean,
It'd be
listen, as long as
it'd be
as long as
crazy.
everybody's doing the same thing, who cares, right? Like the best guys are going
Yeah.
to win. Here's what I would actually do if they said, Rick, you're now in charge. You decide what happens. I would say we are just going to play 72 holes Saturday, Sunday, Monday. I'm not even going to run these guys out here on Thursday to sit
Yeah.
around and wait. I'm not going to run these guys out here on Friday. Let the grounds crew get the pumps out and do everything that they possibly can over the course of the next 2 days. I would play 72 Saturday, Sunday, Monday. On Saturday and Sunday, you just get through as much as you can. The thing is with this KP, I mean, once the storm leaves, the weather's beautiful. It's going to be like 80 and sunny. You're going to have a very wet golf course, obviously, but you're unlikely to get any more interruptions. So if I'm the golf czar, we're running 72 holes over 3 days going into Monday.
Well, and the problem is and this is what happens with all events, right? The first 2 days are not equivalent to the last 2 days because you have the cut at most tournaments, but specifically at this one, you do have a cut, and so you get a lot fewer guys on the back end, and so it's a lot easier to get whatever you need to get in 24 holes, 27 holes, 36 holes if you need to on a Sunday, Monday, whenever the kind of the back half of the tournament is. So I think that's a good that's probably, as your like czar in chief, I would, or as your assistant czar, I would support that. But there is, I know we have this, the PGA Tour does have sort of, they've kind of outlined like, hey, here's what will take place if something like this, happens to go down.
Yeah, there's an order of operations. So the PGA Tour handbook, obviously, they try to play 72 holes whenever possible. When that becomes impossible, the next priority is to complete 54 holes. If you complete a 54-hole event, that is official money being paid out, and the winner gets an official PGA Tour win. We've seen that at times in the past. We actually saw it, was it this year or last year that oh no, Pebble Beach. We saw it at Pebble Beach this year. Wyndham Clark, they washed out the final round. 54 were already completed. He was declared the winner. If they can't get 54 holes in, the next priority is to complete 36. All the players would get the winnings, but this would not be an official win, Patrick. So that's kind of where the PGA Tour looks, and they will not basically under any circumstance go to Wednesday. Tuesday would be the last day they would ever consider finishing an event.
That makes sense. The unofficial win's interesting. I assume at that point you'd have to shell out the FedEx Cup points as well if it is only 36 holes, just because you need FedEx Cup points to finalize that playoff, right? With the top 70 and all those guys around or on the bubble playing this week in the regular season finale. So I as the assistant to the assistant czar, I think what you laid out there worked out perfectly first glance. And I think at minimum they'll be able to get 54 holes in if you think Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and then we'll be on to Cincinnati, aka Memphis.
The other thing, KP, is the refrain you're going to hear this week, and rightfully so in some sense, is that this is the final event. We need these FedEx Cup points. These matter because it's the last event of the regular season. However, same FedEx Cup points as every other event, right? Like I don't think they should be going out of their way to finish this event, but not more than any other event just because it's the last one. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that is fair. It's hard though, right? Because guys specifically change their schedule at the end of the season in a way that they don't in March, April, May. Now you might say, well, play better, right? Like that's always the answer to PGA Tour real and playoff and FedEx, all those questions. But yeah, I broadly agree with you. Like it should not be hey, let's hold up and I don't think they'll do this, but let's hold up the next week, like the first playoff event, just to see who's in the playoffs. Like you already you could end it today and say, here's your 70, like you should have gotten it done over the first 32 weeks or 33 weeks of this season. And I think I think most guys, look, if you're 74 right now, you had your opportunities. You can't be too. I mean, it would be frustrating that Mother Nature kind of intervened on what could have been a week where you kind of sneaked into the playoffs and maybe got a couple rounds in, or excuse me, a couple tournaments into the playoffs, maybe somehow made your way all the way to the Tour Championship. But those are pretty rare cases anyway. So I don't think the urgency. I don't think it's like heightened urgency just because it's the last event necessarily.
Should have played better, should have played earlier, and should have known you're going to the Southeast during hurricane season. What are you doing? Not very smart. But the other thing is, Patrick, I think there is a responsibility from the tour to try to the rounds that do get played is to play them fairly. What I really don't want to see is they start on Thursday, 30 guys get out on the golf course, they stop it, they try to bring them back. That to me would be a bit of compromising the competitive integrity of this event. I think they've just got to come up with a solid plan and roll with it and have that be the most fair way. I don't want the start and stop thing.
I totally agree. I think they might do the start and stop thing because it seems to me that the PGA Tour is always like, if we can play golf, we're going to try to get in as much golf as possible. And that could mean 10 groups going off at 6:45 tomorrow morning in rainy, windy conditions, and then pulling them off after they play 5 holes where all of them are over par on easy holes. And they're like, oops, why did we do that again? Oh yeah, it's because we need to get everyone through here. And so I'm totally with you. I hope it's fair and equitable and everyone gets the same conditions. But as we kind of saw at the Open, that's not really how golf works. And the way that the PGA Tour has managed some of these past events where similar conditions have come about, that's not how the PGA works either. So unfortunately, I think there could be some guys on the short end of the stick, unfortunately.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
we've actually seen this recently. I can't remember. You might be able to
Yeah.
help me out here on what tournament it was. I think there was a Masters where this happened, but there's been big events recently where they sent guys out and it's like 5 holes in. And it's like, yo, like we knew it was gonna rain. Like it's not like, oh, this is shocking that it's like downpouring now. And it just it leaves a weird taste in your mouth because you're like, well, it you get weather at an Open and you're like, well, we don't really know. Like it's kind of a chaotic. It's a free for all. But in this instance, it's kind of an own goal. You're like, yeah, you knew it was going to rain, and you gave these guys almost purposefully like probably worse conditions than these guys. That definitely feels avoidable.
Well, we're going to find out because we're less than 24 hours away from the start of this tournament. We're going to start naming names because there are tons of implications for the FedEx Cup playoffs and much, much more. But we are going to take a quick break. Welcome back to the First Cut Podcast, live on CBS Sports Network. Gentlemen, we've talked already about the weather that is seemingly going to disrupt the Wyndham Championship, but there is plenty on the line, this being the final regular season event before we start those FedEx Cup playoffs next week. And here is the current situation. The top 70, remember, this is relatively new, just the top 70 are going to get themselves into the first leg of the FedEx Cup playoffs. And then each week, they'll advance to the top 50. That'll be for the event in Colorado. And then the top 30 will get themselves into the Tour Championship. Let's start with the guys who are just inside that top 70 number. These guys are currently solidified, but not entirely safe. 66th is Nick Dunlap. Johnny Vegas is 67, Emiliano Grillo 68, Seamus Power 69, and Brendan Todd is 70. I'm going to throw this to you here first, Patrick. There are guys that are certainly deserving, I think, of Nick Dunlap of being higher in these rankings, but it is what it is. These are the ones that are trying to defend their current position.
Yes, and I believe someone crunched the numbers today on Twitter, so it has to be true. And Nick Dunlap is the last guy who is not safe, so who could potentially fall out. So Mark Hubbard should be in next week at the St. Jude Championship, but everyone else beneath him. And like you said, Nick Dunlap, twice a winner already this season, one of 5 multiple-time winners, but doesn't get that FedEx Cup points for that win at the American Express because he was an amateur. And then he only gets 300 for the Barracuda Championship because that was an alternate field event across from the Open. But you also have a lot of other winners on that list, right? You have Harry Hall, who won the ISCO Championship. You have Davis Riley, who's had a pretty poor season, but guess what? He won at Colonial. And you have Jonathan Vegas, who just won at the 3M Open. So a lot of big names also kind of intertwined there. I will say one guy on the outside looking in who I'm disappointed isn't playing. I don't know if it's family or something is happening, but the fact that Ricky Fowler's not in this field, I think is kind of a joke. I think it's a really bad look for him. I don't know if there's circumstances around it and he's outside the top 100, but for him not even to give it a go and say, hey, I could win this tournament, I think it's a bad look for Ricky. I just wanted to put that out there.
Wow, yeah, I'm happy. We could dive into that in just a second. But KP, there's a couple of different angles here. I actually think the playoffs should be top 70 plus any winners who are not otherwise qualified. And if that gets you to 74 or 75, so be it. Those guys have won. I also think it's interesting that Nick Dunlap's win as an amateur, he doesn't get the money, which is fine. That's an amateur status thing. But he also doesn't get the FedEx Cup points, which doesn't make any sense because he's now immediately a member. So they must, what they're doing, KP? They're applying the FedEx Cup points and then granting him membership. If they did it in the opposite order, granting him membership, then giving him FedEx Cup points, he should have it.
I think amateur status is
I know.
Patrick's former Twitter name.
When that came out of my mouth, I was sad that he changed it.
I'm locked into this USA Australia thing now on the water polo, but yeah, the very first thought I had when we threw that list up, because on our cheat sheet, like we kind of the rundown today, I was looking at it and it only goes to 66, which is Nick Dunlap, 65 being Mark Hubbard. The context of Nick Dunlap's season against Mark Hubbard's season, you're like, what? Like, and Dunlap has not been consistent, but he has been great at times, which is not something that somebody like Mark Hubbard can necessarily say. It makes no sense to me that Dunlap wouldn't get the FedEx Cup points, right?
Right. That's what I'm saying. And I understand there are situations in golf where you can earn non-member points, right? We saw Will Zalatoris do that. We have seen that, guys who are not members of the PGA Tour, but your win, the second that final putt drops, I guess maybe he has to accept membership, but he could have been a member. I don't know why they would not allocate the FedEx Cup points for that.
Yeah, like, okay, so what this seems like to me is the boys club, the current PGA Tour, not like wanting to keep things like Nick Dunlap from happening because it hurts. Like, again, we could go like 30 minutes on this. We won't, because we have to go to a break here in a minute and we've got other things to talk about. But it would be like the PGA Tour would be like if all the NFL quarterbacks or all the NFL players were determining what the rules are for entering into the NFL. Like, of course they wouldn't. They would move the age to like 30 before quarterbacks could enter the league, or just something absurd like that, because they would want to protect their positions, right? This is what this screams to me. And we've seen instances of it. Usually get one a year, two a year, maybe. We saw Zalatoris a couple years ago where he was like struggling to get in the playoffs. And you're like, I think he finished like top 5 at 2 majors. Like, what are we doing? Like, what are we even talking about? You know? And Dunlap is sort of this year's version. So it's a bummer for him, but he's fine. Like, you're not worried about him because he's in all these events for next year because he won't he is going to be fine. It just stinks, I think, for the tour where you've got this 20-year-old potential star maybe not making it into your playoffs or potentially not making it into your playoffs. That is if you look at like from just a business decision standpoint, that's a bad look and a bad thing for the tour.
Yeah, there's like, I always say this about the serious or unserious level of the sport. Like, live is the reason I rail on live sometimes is that it's like 75% unserious, and the PGA Tour is still like this PGA Tour is still like 10% unserious, and it shows in moments like this, and with like sponsors exemptions and like rules that don't make any sense for any reason at all. So it's troublesome. You're right. Nick Dunlap is probably safe. Not technically, but he's going to need a handful of guys to basically finish 1 through 5 to get enough points to beat him. So Patrick, those guys who are
real quick, he should be in the top 50.
Yes, which is important because of access to signature events for next year.
Right.
The guys outside, Patrick, Victor Perez, 71. We saw him make a run at the Olympics last week. No FedEx Cup points, obviously, for that. Davis Riley, Andrew Putnam, Kurt Kitayama, and Luke List. You can go further down the list and find some more names there, but those are the likely candidates to try to jump up and steal these spots from those guys just inside.
Yeah, I think an interesting subplot here in kind of the entire landscape of the PGA Tour is those DP World Tour guys who are in the card last year. You have someone like Victor Perez. You have someone like Nikolai Hogard, who is 79th on the list. Ryan Fox as well. I mean, he won the BMW PGA Championship. He's outside, or he is number 100. Sammy Valimaki's kind of popped every so often, like at the Mexico Open. He's just inside the top 90. So I'm interested to see how many of those guys make the top 70. And then as we progress into the FedEx Cup fall, how many of those guys actually end up keeping their PGA Tour cards, and kind of the decision tree from there of, do I want to be a part-time PGA Tour member combined with a DP World Tour member, and kind of the career arc they go if they don't end up earning full-time status after earning it through that mechanism of finishing inside the top 10 on the DP World Tour. So that's kind of the subplot I'm looking at. But yeah, like you said, I mean, the defending champion, Lucas Glover, he's 75th, hasn't had a great year after going back to back, which is pretty interesting, because I think if Lucas Glover went back to back this year as opposed to last year, he would be on that U.S. President's Cup team. And obviously he wasn't on the U.S. Ryder Cup team, but that, I mean, I'm all over the place, but the back end of that U.S. President's Cup team is very susceptible for someone going on a run here and claiming their own spot. And so could it be a Keith Mitchell who's had a great ball striking year but can't putt? Adam Shank's been kind of frisky, and I think Andrew Novak's in great form too. All those guys kind of outside the top 70.
Lucas Glover won the exact two events that made it too late for him to make the Ryder Cup team, and too early to make the President's Cup team. If he won any two other back-to-back events, he would have been on one of those teams, right?
Yeah. It's a shame.
Probably.
I don't know that he'd have to win like 3 in a row to make this year's team, right?
He'd have to run the table.
I don't know. The back end of that President's Cup team is looking like, is
but who
someone you can rely on?
Real quick, you're not going to kick off Russ, your boy.
No,
Max
obviously
is probably going to be on it. Max is going to be on it.
Okay.
Brian Harmon, probably, I don't know. And then you get into your problem is you get into the Akshay future guys that need to be on it. Akshay's 11th. Then you get Burns, JT. Yeah, I don't know. It would be interesting. Cam Young's 19th.
Chris Kirk is in the 12th hole right now.
Yeah, so
I don't think any of us believe Chris Kirk will be on that team.
No, that would be the spot for Lucas Glover. I can't believe we're talking about the President's Cup.
Yeah, that for a guy who hasn't sniffed anything in 12 months. But we are going to focus more of our attention towards the top of that board. We still have picks for this week's Wyndham Championship, but we're going to take a quick break. Welcome back to the First Cut Podcast. We are diving into the minutia that is all things Wyndham Championship, all things FedEx Cup Playoffs, and we are moving up that points list. We've talked about the repercussions of those hovering around that top 70 line, but Patrick, I'm very interested in this top 50 line, because that'll be the second leg of the FedEx Cup playoffs. And not only will qualifying for Colorado be important, but it's also going to get you access into all of those signature events for next year. So while guys are eyeing top 125, guys eye top 70, that big money spot, that's the top 50.
Yeah, it's really the difference between the PGA Tour and the PGB Tour, right? And so you have guys like Jordan Spieth. Is he going to be a PGB Tour guy next year? Although I think we can all agree he's someone who would get sponsors exemptions or inside the top 30 in the world.
It's nonsense.
Into all these into all these tournaments, just like Ricky Fowler will next year also, even though he's not playing this week. Sorry to kind of go back there on that. But Rick, I totally agree. The game within the game this week, I think a lot of guys would like to do that dirty work of securing themselves inside the top 50 this week, when you don't have guys like Scotty Scheffler, Rory McIlroy in the field to contend with. And so someone like Will Zalatoris is 45th. He hasn't had a great year. He had a great start to his year at the Genesis Invitational and the Arnold Palmer Invitational. But you have guys like Justin Rose, 52nd, Minwoo Lee, a player who should be in those signature events. We talk about young stars like Nick Dunlap that KP brought up, of people who, can kind of relate to and cheer on and want to see on their televisions. Minwoo Lee is one of them. I can't believe he didn't get a single sponsors exemption into those signature events this year. So yeah, a little game within the game. Nick Taylor's been putrid since that win at the Phoenix Open, but that win's obviously buoyed him. And so a lot to play for. And your boy Vic there at 55 with work to do, although he'll be fine through OWGR most likely.
He will be, but I think you want to, trying to defend your FedEx Cup, you don't want to bow out
Yeah.
early into the playoffs or not get back to the Tour Championship. Hovland, 55th, is kind of the biggest name, but he's not playing this week. There are other guys in the field at the Wyndham Championship, like Aaron Rai, currently 53rd, Eric Cole, 54th, Maverick McNeely, 57th, even Jordan Spieth, who has given us some more insight, KP, on his wrist injury. He is at 62nd. So this is actually, to me, the much more compelling line, if you want to put that on the leaderboard, because it is going to almost guarantee who we see a lot of next year in the signature events.
Yeah, I mean, kind of like I kind of interrupted Patrick there, but the fact that there's sponsor exemptions into these elevated or whatever they're called signature events is just, it's preposterous to me that you can say, if you're the PGA Tour, and I've yelled about this a lot on the First Cut podcast, but if you're the PGA Tour, you can say, well, we're the place where it's a meritocracy. Well, other than like these kind of backdoor exemptions into into our best events. Like that's just, it just rubs me the wrong way. And it devalues the product in a lot of ways. Cause it's not, I mean, it is a meritocracy, but there's these like, again, backdoor exemptions, which just kind of stinks. I think Hovland was the story there. I mean, just him not even potentially making it to the second round of the FedEx Cup playoffs, and certainly like having a ton of work to do to get to East Lake. That's massive. And then, we've talked about Spieth a bunch this week as well. I thought you asked a really good question of him yesterday. Got a really good answer out of him about him kind of having this almost like phantom fear, not phantom fear. It's a real fear of this phantom, like when he hits his irons, he's worried about it like hurting his wrist. And he said it doesn't really, but I'm still scared of it. Like it's just this thing that's kind of lingering there. So you see him at 63. I'd be shocked if he made it to East Lake. He has seemed like kind of the bubble boy for East Lake the last 5 years anyway. He's always on that 28, 29, 30, 31 line. I don't think he'll get that high this year. And then his offseason is going to be interesting. Probably no President's Cup. Probably going to have some sort of, I don't know if it's surgery, but something done to his wrist that hopefully fixes it for 2025. I think if you're a Spieth fan, there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic about next year. He sounds like it's an injury that people have and can come back from. And he's driven the ball really, really well. If he can somehow figure out the wrist and figure out how to overcome whatever's wrong with his iron play, I think you could be looking at a 2025 that is kind of a refresh, maybe a reboot even of the Jordan Spieth experience.
Yeah, it was interesting that he acknowledged something that we had kind of speculated on, Patrick, which is the shots in which his club has to dig into the ground are the ones that he's most worried about. And that was kind of bearing out in Jordan's statistics. So it was nice to see him kind of acknowledge something that we had thrown against the wall. Now, you brought this up yesterday, and it is a very big storyline and a reason why a lot of these guys are here. And that is, of course, the Comcast Business Tour Top 10, because there are payouts at the end of this week. But these are the guys who are not only playing for immediate money this week because of those season-long payouts, but like you said, they're trying to do a little bit of their dirty work early before we get to East Lake. So we've got Shane Lowry, currently 10th in the FedEx Cup standing. Sungjae Im is currently 9th. They're going to try to hold on to their positions and get those payouts, while you see guys like maybe Akshay Bhatia, who's currently 15th. I don't know how well he would have to play to get himself into the top 10, but a good week there could do it.
Yes, this is the game within the game, I guess. And so Batia is about 250 points behind Shane Lowry, so needs a really good start to usurp him. But Lowry's a guy who has obviously been on the PGA Tour for a while, but I was shocked to hear that he's never made the Tour Championship. And he's a guy who missed the playoffs last season, didn't really play a ton of events. And then you have other guys kind of in that 20 range. Christian Bezuidenhout, he got the points meant for Nick Dunlap there at the American Express, I believe. That's why he's so far up. He's ahead of someone like Davis Thompson, who's won on the PGA Tour this season and has had a really good year. So I kind of liken this week almost. I was thinking about it when KP was talking about the top 50 of like the playing games in the NBA playoffs, right? This is kind of to play yourself, to give yourself a chance to go into the playoffs, where even though the St. Jude Championship is technically the start of the FedEx Cup playoffs, it kind of feels like the real playoffs is the top 50 in the BMW Championship, because you get all the rewards, the bonuses start coming in a little bit, and they obviously start this week as well with the Comcast top 10. How could we forget, right, Rick?
That's right. I will never forget, and I have never forgotten. KP, the other thing to remember is that when we get to the playoffs, so next week, as if this entire structure wasn't confusing enough, we're just going to quadruple the points. Okay, we're just going to take what they've been making all year and we're quadrupling them. And what that will create is a situation where, yes, your peers will also get quadruple points, but now you're going to see a lot more shifting because a win is worth 2,000 instead of 500. So you see those big gaps of 300 or 400 points. While those are massive in the regular season, they are much more obtainable in the FedEx Cup playoffs, which is why you have seen guys get hot right now and make deep runs into the Tour Championship.
Yeah. First of all, I'm laughing because I never know if Rick is being serious about some of this stuff or not. He might not even know if he's being serious or not. It is rather amusing. We've seen, yes, you're right. We've seen this. We saw it happen in Colorado with Billy Horschel back in 14, I believe, when he made it all the way to and won the FedEx Cup. So yes, you get hot at the right time. I think this is like a little niche or maybe too inside baseball, but is there one question that I have about, like, as we get into the playoffs, is there anything that anybody can do to catch Scotty Scheffler? Right. Because like, he's so far ahead. Like I don't know if we can pull the numbers back up, but he's so far ahead and his floor is so high in the first couple of play. I mean, he is, so Hideki's in 8th. I guess Xander could pretty easily catch him, and some of the top 5 guys could catch him, but his floor, Rick, is so high for these first 2 events that it's like, what's Scotty Scheffler going to do? Finish like T9 and you still get, however many 100 or 1,000 points for that. So I think we have to look at a scenario in which it's kind of going to be automatic that he starts either first or second at the Tour Championship. And now all of a sudden, I don't know how you guys feel about OWGR wins versus PGA Tour wins versus Data Golf wins versus RickRunGood.com wins, but Scotty could win 9 times this year, and he's going to be the favorite to win 9 or 10 times, and the heavy favorite at the Tour Championship when he starts with a lead. So I think that's one. Obviously, most of those guys are not involved this week, but I think that's a pretty interesting subplot as we head into these playoffs.
Yeah, so final thought here, Patrick. Xander could catch Scotty with basically 1 win, depending on what Scotty Scheffler would do. Barring Scotty finishing basically in the bottom couple of spots in each of the playoff events and someone else probably winning one or both of them, it will be Scotty Scheffler with a 2-shot lead going into East Lake. He's almost boxed everybody else. And it's kind of crazy because it feels like he should have a 10-shot lead going into East Lake. He's only going to get a 2-shot lead.
Who knows if that's enough given the past couple of years at East Lake too, right? He had the lead each of the last 2 seasons, coughed it up to Rory McIlroy and then coughed it up to Victor Hovland. So I'm with KP. I think the story of the playoffs to look ahead is if Scheffler runs the table, which he is fully capable of, he seems to eat up these limited field events. That'll be 10 wins. 10 wins in 2024. Absolutely bonkers.
That is a number in the modern game that I did not think was possible. So
agree.
I'm very excited. I mean, I also didn't think what he was doing right now was possible. So really excited to see how it all shakes out. We are going to pick some winners and some sleepers for this week's Wyndham Championship. But first, we're going to take a quick break. Welcome back to the First Cut podcast, and we've got winners, at least hopefully, for the Wyndham Championship. And it would not be an episode of the First Cut, gentlemen, if we didn't have a little impromptu trivia question. And this is a two-parter, because I genuinely don't think you're going to get the first part correct. But this event, the Wyndham Championship, one of the oldest events on the PGA Tour calendar, it dates back to 1938. Any idea who won the inaugural Wyndham Championship in 1938?
Webb Simpson.
No. He wouldn't be born for another 50 years.
Sam Snead.
Sam Snead is correct. Yes.
Oh.
See, Patrick, you'll learn when you're in the game as long as KP, when you get a question from the 1930s or 40s about who the winner is, the answer is always Sam Snead. Just that's the go-to default answer. Now, here is part two. Closest without going over. The amount of money that Sam Snead took home for that victory. Patrick, you get to go first.
He got a couple chickens and a bay of hay. I'm gonna say he got a bale of hay.
See how you fry their brains?
Close is not going over. Gosh, well, I mean, I'm horrible. 10 grand.
10 grand is Patrick's guess.
No. He went way over. It was probably like $400.
Chickens.
All right, it was $1,200. So Kyle gets the clean sweep for this week. Congratulations, Kyle. The whole purse was $5,000. It is much more this time around. In fact, it's nearly $8 million. The winner will get $1.4 million. And gentlemen, I want to know who that winner is going to be. So KP, let's throw it to you first and tell me who's going home with that $1.4 million bucks.
Yeah, I've got Akshay Bhatia. He's had obviously a very good year. We just talked about him being on the President's Cup team. He's had some real close calls recently. Detroit, Travelers played very well. He hasn't, his last two starts have been kind of not as good. He missed the cut at the Open Championship, finished kind of way outside at the 3M Open after the Open Championship. But the thing I like about him, I was reading Joseph Amanya, who works over or writes for the Fried Egg. He was writing about how Sedgefield is the most penalizing golf course in terms of like how wide your misses are. I think, and Rick might have done something on this also in his newsletter this week, but just in terms of like driving accuracy, it's incredibly important. And Akshay's actually been very accurate this year compared to his peers off the tee. He's not crazy long. He's not, he's probably a little bit above average, right? Maybe right around average in terms of length, but I really like that accuracy. And I like how he's been playing. I like how guys kind of build up to wins on the PGA Tour. So I think Akshay gets it done at Sedgefield at the Wyndham this week.
Yeah, 30-1 for Akshay. I'll tell you what, while I was out there yesterday, they really are tight fairways, and you have to kind of the way the trees hang over, and you miss by a little bit, you're in the rough. You miss by a little bit more, you're behind a tree. So I could understand the idea that not only keeping it in play, but keeping it close to the fairway is going to be important. I went with Cam Davis here a little bit longer, 40-1, and I think that based on what Kyle said, Patrick, but also what we heard from someone like Will Zalatoris yesterday, who said he's probably only going to hit 5 drivers around Sedgefield. That bodes well for Cam Davis. He's a great long hitter, but can spray it a little bit. I think with the opportunity to club down, he's won a couple of starts ago. I think this is one of the best spots for him. So I went with Cam Davis at 40-1, and you too, you found yourself an accurate golfer as well.
2 wins, both on a Donald Ross design there for Cam Davis, also at Detroit Golf Club. So you got that going for you, Rick. I went with Brian Harman. I'm thinking we're going to need a mutter this week, and Brian Harman is certainly that. The defense at the Open Championship wasn't great. I'm assuming he was in the wrong wave. Don't quote me on that. That's just for my handicap and for my own mental gymnastics. I'm saying he was, because before that, he was playing some really good golf. Top 10 at the Travelers Championship, top 25 at the U.S. Open, the Scottish Open too. And I look at someone like Harman, who's accurate off the tee. KP just outlined how important that is this week. And then from there, it's all about approach play and putting. This tends to turn into a putting contest. And Brian Harman is the only player in this field over the last 6 months to rank top 30 in approach and top 30 in putting. I think that bodes well for him. And I think he is due for a win.
Brian Harman, 30-1, now past his defense of the Claret Jug. Maybe get back to normalcy just a little bit. Patrick, I'm actually going to bump this one right back to you here and ask you who your sleeper is. Someone farther down the board that you think can make a little bit of noise in what is probably going to be a pretty chaotic week.
Yeah, I'm riding with the bubble boy, Victor Perez, flying that French flag. He's playing some really good golf, obviously, there at Le Golf National, almost grabbing the bronze medal there, finishing 4th with that final round 63. But he has 4 top 12 finishes in his last 7 starts. So he was 3rd at the Canadian Open, also played great at the Scottish Open. And he does 2 things pretty well. It's approach play and putting. And that's what I'm really keying in on. He's going to have to drive it a little bit better. But like you mentioned with Cam Davis, you club down a lot, you get some long irons in your hand. And I think Perez will be playing out of the fairway plenty. So I think let's ride the hot hand. He's got plenty to play for and he's playing good golf. So why not roll with the Frenchman?
He is going off the 10th tee with Nikolai Højgaard and Max Grazerman, and also maybe still running a little bit of that French momentum. Celine Boutier, KP, is currently leading the Olympic Games on the women's side. Well done with your top 10 selection for this week. Find me a sleeper, and I think I've already thrown out his name.
Yeah, you did. I almost picked Celine to win also. I got gun shy at the end, but Nikolai Højgaard, you want to talk about somebody who's awesome with long irons and hitting just flighted long iron shots. Nikolai Højgaard, coming off, also played in the Olympics last week. I really like him. He hasn't necessarily played great golf, but his talent level is not 55-1. Same thing for Will Zalatoris at 90-1. It's not a talent level that it's mismatched with the number that they're at. So I like Højgaard to play well at Wyndham this week.
I went with Seamus Power because if you think about the long-term skill sets, driving accuracy, approaches, and putting, that should be what we get out of the winner for this week. Power hasn't been great this year, but he certainly checks off all the boxes for those long-term skill sets. The Wyndham Championship, it's going to be a wet one. We will have you covered on the First Cut podcast after each and every round. That right there is Kyle Porter, Patrick McDonald. I thank you very much both for your time today and, of course, all your great analysis. If you like what you've heard on the First Cut podcast, we have a couple of different options for you to be able to consume it. You can watch us on YouTube 6 or 7 times throughout the week. That is the Golf on CBS YouTube channel. And of course, you can download and listen on both Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else you get your pods. We'll see you the next time on the First Cut.